Hi, I'm Yenna. I'm a modernized mom. I cleaned and then everything came back out again. That's just the nature of life. I read 12 books this month. Let's talk about them. Love is a Pink Cake, Irresistible Bakes for Morning, Noon, and Night by ptak. I pre-ordered this from Barnes & Noble. Soaking poppy seeds in black tea releases their floral flavor while activating the availability of their nutrition, transforming the flavor of this muffin. This exploded my brain from the get-go. This is ptak's fourth cookbook. I've never read any of her other cookbooks, and this sounds a lot like her I Made It cookbook. This is post the royal wedding, lemon and elderflower wedding cake hoopla. And it was really interesting to see her choices, how hard she leaned into how hard she leaned on the seasonal. And also really interesting to see how her, like, I made it, I'm famous in the food world, like, I have luxury at my fingertips. Reality is, like, she can do, what I'm trying to say is that she can do anything now, basically, and she chose to basically pay tribute to farmers and farms and obscure produce. Like, as I was reading this, I felt like this is the food version of stealth wealth. Like, I normally despise it, absolutely despise it, when a cookbook calls for some obscure product that you see in the ingredients list and you know that you're never going to use it for anything else, which happens a lot here. But in this case, I understand why. I get it. ptak is trying to create this habit of shopping locally, of shopping seasonally, of establishing relationships with your local vendors and moving away from supermarket, impersonal, Amazon fresh shopping. Like, it felt really revolutionary. Dare I say that this is a disruptor of a cookbook? Kind of like when Ina Garten wrote her Barefoot Contessa cookbooks back in the early aughts, with all of these like rustic French recipes. But now, like, most Americans are like, oh yeah, beef bourguignon, apple tatin, creme fraiche, mais oui, bien sûr. This is my terrible French. Anyway, I thought this cookbook was really great. I really like the format. It's broken down into mornings, afternoons, after a meal, party, savories, and holiday treats, done in both California and English style. Yes, it includes the lemon elderflower cake recipe, but TBH, I drooled so much more for the marble cake, the pandan coconut cake with strawberry, the mochi buttercream tiramisu cake, coconut pudding cake, coffee walnut cake with fernet, whatever that is, the jostaberry and loganberry matcha cake. This book definitely speaks to the intermediate advanced level of a home cook, home baker. Nevertheless, I really feel like this is going to stand the test of time, and it's maybe gonna be one of those like sought after cookbooks in the near future. Like, there is a recipe in here for peach leaf ice cream. And she goes on about the merits of a peach leaf. You can't buy a peach leaf at your grocery store. You have to ask a peach farmer for the peach leaves. And like, what kind of quiet luxury stealth wealth is that? To have like to have that kind of lifestyle. To have that lifestyle applied to your food. I really didn't go into this with much expectations, but I was actually pretty blown away. I can't wait to start doing summer baking with all of the summer produce and start cooking from this. And yeah, talking to my local vendors with my extremely limited Spanish. I also pre-ordered this One Punch Man number 25, volume 25. I lulled a lot. No notes, maybe, except more Saitama, please. I read Women Holding Things by Maira Kalman because I think it's Ashmi told me in the comments about a recent Maira Kalman that I didn't know about, so rushed out to get it. And this one is very quiet. Yes, women holding things like objects, but also women holding grudges, women holding ideas, and the general context of women holding life together for their families, for their communities, for the fabric of society. And the tone of this one is so much more quiet, I felt, than her other ones. And the concept of this one as well is also more complex than her previous works, which are fairly pretty simple, pretty sweet and banal and everyday. But this one, while it is just as lovely, this is more about how integral women are and the merit of their lived experiences, what a heavy burden that can be, how you have to keep holding on. And also the paintings, the textures are getting thicker. There's oil and acrylic paintings in here. I think my favorite one is Gertrude Stein, holding true to herself, writing things very few people liked or even read. This was lovely. Oh my God. I swear, my son's medicine ball is like the ghost in my house. It just pops up. I read A Pocketful of Happiness by Richard E. Grant. I think I said in my last month's wrap-up that I am a big fan of the actor, so I am a little biased here, but I realized I really didn't know anything about him. Like the fact that he's from South Africa, I thought he was British this whole time. I mean, he is, it's like an expat situation. I had no idea that he was married to the same woman for 35 years. And that's what this memoir is really about. It's about his life, but in the context of his marriage to Joan Washington, who was a dialect coach for everyone and anyone, who he unfortunately lost to cancer a couple years ago, like during lockdown. So this is kind of a lockdown baby where he does go over the thoughts he had during lockdown. And unfortunately, they were heavy thoughts and feelings about his life together with his wife, who found out that she had stage 4 cancer and she died like within 12 months of their diagnosis. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. This had such a youthful exuberance. Richard Grant has such a genuinely starstruck adolescent personality. He just seems to genuinely enjoy being there. Like he's just excited to be part of the crowd. And as much sorrow from the cancer stories, which are truly sad, but of course nevertheless uplifting, because it was a good example of how one might be able to carry yourself during such a hard time. It's still very light because there are so many celebrity stories and anecdotes and like this is what I really want out of a celebrity memoir. I want the tea. I want to know what all of the celebrities are like. And he has worked with everybody because he has literally been in everything. He's one of the best character actors. His wife would call him Mustard because they call him to add the flavor. I kind of felt like this was an IRL Evelyn Hugo book, but like good, better written. Like I can't even begin to talk about all of the celebrities that he talks about, that he name drops, both Hollywood and British theater and cinema worlds. Yeah, I really recommend. I really wish that I got to get the library audiobook for this read by him, but in whatever form. I really highly recommend. I read 3 books by David Sedaris this month, all 3 from library audiobooks, because I kind of realized this month, now that I've told myself I'm not listening to another Agatha Christie audiobook, like I felt the void. I really needed an audiobook in my life. Squirrel Seeks Chipmunk is a really short, really cute anthropomorphic fables. It was read by both David Sedaris and a large cast of other performers, including Jean Smart, who... No. Oh no. including Elaine Stritch, who read a couple of the stories, and they were just some of the highlights. Her performance is such a highlight in this book. This is funny, this is charming, this is dark. It's kind of like a Gen X Aesop with MTV cartoons. Like, that was the vibe. If you're a fan of David Sedaris, I highly recommend. This is not one to miss. Dress Your Family in Corduroy and Denim was read by the author. As the title suggests, in this collection, he talks a lot about his family throughout their childhood, their relationship with their parents, their relationship with each other. But as with all David Sedaris, it was so poignant to hear. It was so poignant hearing how easily he points the finger and puts the blame on equally on everyone else as much as himself. And his love for them, for humanity in general, is so palpable. And I just love his attitude, how he feels about things, his observations of the world. Let's Explore Diabetes with Owls is also read by the author, with some lovely music from Andrew Bird. This has both studio recordings as well as live recordings on his tours with like live audience reaction. Those are so charming. I read in my notes that there's a bonus at the end of this audiobook, but I didn't write what, and I can't remember. But out of the three, this was my hands down favorite. It might be my favorite David Sedaris, period. There's a Costco story in this. He talks about his diary writing, which I'm really fascinated by. I've read his diaries. I think they're called Theft by Finding and A Carnival of Snackery. Because just like with everything and everyone else, he looks at himself just as objectively. He was saying that it was hard to reread his earlier entries, not because they were boring, but because they're too affected. Like poetry written by somebody who's never read any poetry, but thinks they know what poetry is about. And he acknowledges his own vanities and his own shortcomings. And yeah, he does not seem like the greatest of person, but that's never, like, he's not afraid to paint himself unflatteringly. On the surface, he comes across as kind of a terrible person, like eagerly throwing other people under the bus just for a penny. He has a big pick-me attitude, but the same willingness to examine himself and judge himself as much as he does others, that attitude just wins me over every time. And so at this point, I think I've become a David Sedaris completionist, but do not ask me for a tier ranking of his canon, because that's just not the relationship that I have with him and his books. I feel like they're all a piece of him at different points in his life. And while the books may be sectioned into themes, to me, if any, it's like what life phase he's in. Like, I recall when I was reading his diaries that one of my favorite things about reading his diaries was how he starts off in the 70s, young, totally broke, totally lost. And then you read his entries from when he's older, more established, wealthier, but he still reads as the same person throughout. His viewpoints, the way he looks at the world remains the same. That core personality remains intact. Yeah, I highly, highly recommend David Sedaris audiobooks, especially if you prefer ones more lighthearted, but big on personality, kind of like a friend who's talking to you and makes you loll as you go about your day. Quietly Hostile by Samantha Irby, I also pre-ordered through Barnes & Noble. I missed her so much. I was like huffing this freshly printed book of her wits. There's a lockdown essay in this, pandemic cons, death, uncertainty, economic collapse, the fall of society. Pandemic pro, absolutely zero traffic on eastbound I-94 at rush hour on a Wednesday. I'm sorry, I hate merging. She is just so middle class relatable. The allure of affordable garbage that you just don't need. There is an essay on how she would rewrite all of Sex and the City and like her time spent on And Just Like That. Oh, I ate that up. And her whole shopping near TV show experience, another Hollywood anecdote. Gia Tolentino has a blurb here that says, "Stay up all night, miss your subway stop, spit out your beverage funny." I heartily agree. I read Yves Saint Laurent Haute Couture, which is part of the Catwalk series that I bought during the Barnes & Noble 50% off hardcover sale. This is a gigantic beast, so I'm not gonna hold it up the whole time. Look at this gorgeous pink. I tried to match it. It's not quite the same, but you get the idea. This is hot. This is pink. This is fashion. So if any of you were thinking about getting this and thinking that you're going to be seeing like the Tom Ford stuff, this isn't it. As it says, this is purely Yves Saint Laurent Haute Couture from his collections during 1962 to 2002. And again, I thought I knew about Yves Saint Laurent, but I had no idea that he's from Algeria. Again, it was like a French expat situation. I had no idea that he was like a disruptor of fashion. And this book reminded me that every business is a company made up of people. He was one of the first to have multi-ethnic models in his atelier and incorporated a new global customer look into his collections as opposed to like culturally appropriating. He really served the woman and her femme essence. He served glamour. The 60s are a major highlight. All of the models look like Jackie O, but it's because Jackie O went to him. This was just the epitome of taste. Can you imagine just seeing these clean, smooth lines and silhouettes after seeing like the 50s Dior thin waist A-line skirts? He was a genius. And then the sexy 70s with the sheer tops, slinky fabrics draping the curvy frame, that Marlene Dietrich manly sensuality evoking power. All the ribbons and the pussy bows, so sexy. With one flick, you get a swift unraveling. Andre Leon Talley has a line here talking about refined simplicity. These clothes look like nothing, but they're everything. And admittedly, by the 80s, they do look very 80s and for like old women. But by his retirement in 2002, when like people like John Galliano was sending those clowns drawn by the amazing makeup artist Pat McGrath down his runways, I can only imagine how defeated he must have felt. Like, he used to be the new innovator hot shit, and now it's these new kids on the block. I thought that was his version of the MCU-ification of fashion. Everything's just a spectacle and not real clothing. So yeah, don't expect to read this book and see like tribute sandals or like those monogram bags. This is purely about the man, the legend, Yves Saint Laurent. I watched that movie from 2014. It was okay. It definitely shows like the personal side to the man. I don't know if I can recommend that or not, but it was interesting. I read Checkout 19 by Claire Louise Bennett. I popped my buddy read cherry with Ben from Benjamin Journal. Couldn't have asked for a better experience. We had a lovely back and forth on Instagram DM, and we both had a really good time with this book because this book is all about the pleasure of books, like owning books without the need to read it, and its mere physical presence is enough to elicit joy. I read Pond from her last month, and Checkout 19 is much less awkward, way more confident in what it has to say, which is that books, words, the act of reading, the reading experience, the reading life, the imagination is fantastic. It's magical. That there are so many great books out there still yet unread, but on one's radar, so many authors still to get to know. I want to underline things with violet ink. And this is a lockdown book. She wrote this during lockdown, and she has a great interview with Clairvaux Watkins, who I also love. And that interview is so hilarious. Like after these two books, after that interview, and after drinking a cup of Lapsang Souchong, how do you say that? I really get the feel of what Claire Louise Bennett is like. Approachable but cold, no nonsense from her working class background, very smart, and I really enjoy getting to know her and seeing her take on things. Is there anything worse that can befall a young woman than to be robbed of impulse, than to have her pounding promise laid to waste? I read Chlorine by Jade Song. I read this in one day. It was so temporal. It was so singular. It was a clear voice. What a powerful debut. This is queer. This is aspirational. This is a story about teens, like high school age kids that I actually really, really liked. That doesn't happen often, especially in a contemporary novel situation. This has immigrant instability. I really, really loved the main character Ren's assertive voice, but I also couldn't help but think about her poor mom. She's like a single mom, but not really, because they're just separated because the father lives in China. And so I really appreciate the split family situation. The mom is a Wong Kar-wai fan. She's somehow pulled it together raising an incredibly independent kid, wholly independent from her and living in like a totally different culture, and still having a good, although complicated, relationship with her daughter. This is surreal. This is not a book for people who I need to know what's going on here, really. You need to let go and just enjoy, just deep dive into this. It's a quick read to dive right in. Highly recommend. And last, but definitely not least, because I really think that this might be the favorite of the bunch this month, romantic comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld. I mean, I bought this at Costco. This was so fun. This was delightful. This was funny. This was heart-clutchingly awe. My husband and I often think about if we were to mix any couple IPs to blend into our own customized content, what would it be? I think Curtis Sittenfeld did that. And in this case, she blends Saturday Night Live with the rom-com movie tone with a good midsection of like a pandemic lockdown theme going on. This was corny. This was cheesy. This was cringy. But but I loved it. I ate this up. I need this as a movie. I cannot stop imagining the celebrity character as John Mayer. And so that throughout my read, I kept having his song stuck in my head. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed this. If you want to read something fun and just really lighthearted with like the classic 2000s rom-com tone, this is the book for you. So that's everything that I read in May. May was very fun. I had a great time reading all of these fun, funny books with some serious lit fic thrown in there, along with some surprisingly thought-provoking nonfiction, like the Claire Ptak Cookbook. I just came back from watching the new Spider-Verse movie. It was so good. I remember watching the first one and feeling my brain exploding because I felt like I was seeing something new for the first time. That's always an exciting experience. It's the beginning of June, but I'm already reading some pretty fun books, with the most thought-provoking ones coming from the most surprising sources. I'm reading a memoir written by Jewel. I'm reading the new Tom Hanks novel, and I'm reading Bones and All. And out of the three, I am loving Bones and All. Who am I? Like, what's going on? It was gloomy for so many months, and now the sun has decided to come out, and it does not look like it's going anywhere. So we're looking at a hot summer. It remains to be seen if it's going to be a hot girl summer or a Hobbit staying in my hole summer. But that's all from me. I hope that you all had a great reading month of May, a great living life of May, and that you have a great June. I'll see you soon. Bye.